Hello, audience, and welcome back to another astronomically astounding episode of the Arcane Archive presents Cautionary Chronicles. That's right. We have another sensational lineup of stories here to tell today. We hope that you'll enjoy, most of which today I think is going to be a bit lighthearted. Nice little fun time, a bit of cringe here or there, of course. Hopefully nothing too spine powdery, with maybe like a little dibble of some, morals and some potential just advice or unfortunate situations here or there that we want to comment on ourselves. How are you doing today, Sam? Are you ready to get into this with the people today?
Yeah, we found some good ones, and it's been an all right week so far, so I'll take that. Yeah, we got nothing too dark today, which is nice.
Yeah, sometimes you gotta kind of just keep it nice and light, nice and weightless, just like a feather, you just kind of floating. We every now and then, I think it's good for the soul. But with that being the case, let's go ahead and jump right into it. As always, please do be sure to like and comment on the videos. Any of these stories here, let us know what your thoughts and feelings are. We're very interested. Obviously, share and subscribe to the channel, and we appreciate any and all support you can offer. So let's go! First story of the day that we're going to be reading is titled Wizard Makes a Blind Character and Then Gets Upset When He Is Blind by Dirty USB. Was playing in a 5-player group in college with a guy that wanted to make a blind wizard who relied on their bird familiar for sight. However, he was also constantly telling his bird to give other players the help action, essentially giving the martial characters on-demand advantage by harrying or harassing the enemies. DM said that the baddies were probably going to start shooting at the bird that's pissing them off. Wizard gets pissed and says the DM is unfairly targeting him and that it's not fair for me if I'm just permanently blinded for the rest of the fight. Well, the DM says that if the bird stops harassing the baddies, they'll stop targeting the bird. The wizard refuses. The bird dies, wizard is blind the rest of the encounter and sulks like a baby. Maybe don't put your only pair of eyes in horrible, terrible danger. End post. Now that's a pretty short, sweet, quick one right there for you. This is a particular character concept that I must say I'm pretty sure many people have thought about, considered. I myself have thought about that, and it's also something that has actually been showcased on Critical Role for all you diehard fans out there. The character Shikasta is essentially that, literally a blind man. I believe, I don't know if he was a wizard. He may have been a warlock, I think.
I thought wasn't he like also some? I mean, I don't know what he was. I don't remember. It's been
I think he was a warlock. I might be wrong about that though. Either way, he did the same gimmick and trope where you are a blind character, but your familiar is your eye. You can use the ability of Find Familiar to transfer your senses to your familiar specifically. And it's definitely a very interesting, cool concept. It offers a little bit more originality, a little bit more complexity to the character, but as is showcased here, it also offers a high amount of danger to go along with it. Because the instant that your familiar is caught up in any kind of AoE spell or attack or ability, or is just downright targeted, and if you are also deliberately, targeting enemies with like harassment and stuff, then your character is blind, and especially as a spellcaster, loses like freaking 80% of their combat ability or even just their spell ability, because most spells require you to be able to see where you're casting them.
Yeah, I mean, unless you're only using sound-based spells, you're kind of shit out of luck. I look, I not to be like mean, and like I understand people wanting to be like, my character's different.
And using an interesting, cool mechanic
the blind character, it just doesn't work well most of the time. Similar to why I don't play with anyone who, or like why we never have people play Kenku at the table.
Yeah, because of the whole mimicry thing.
It just tends to not work super well. Not that it can't, and not that if the right person did it, it wouldn't be cool.
Yeah, it's not
And
impossible. You know, they did okay, I think, in Critical Role. Like Shikasta didn't seem, a hindrance or whatever, or
but
particularly.
yeah, but that was also like with familiar and all that. Like I've had friends that are like, well, they did a blind fighting style, so like I want to play a blind character. And I'm like, okay. And they're like, I want to use a bow. And I'm like,
You would have disadvantage. You could try.
that doesn't
You could you,
work
you could
because
listen and hear, I guess, or like whatever, but you're
there's
gonna
not real support for a full blind character
no.
fighting anything except right in front of them. Because they're blind and the fighting style only applies to when you're in combat, the amount of bullshit that you would have to deal with outside of combat, where it's like, oh, well, I'm blind. And it's like, yeah, so I want to try to climb that rock. Well, you have no idea what the side of the rock looks like.
Or at
Disadvantage.
least you can't see anything more than 10 feet around you. Like we can even go so far as to say, okay, you've got blind sense, so you have blind sight out to 10 feet around you. Okay, sure, that's fine, fair enough, but that still doesn't mean that you're able to like sense. Like for instance, what if there's a rock slide or something? What if there's freaking projectiles of any kind coming at you outside of your blind sense? Like they would have advantage on all it. Like any range combatants would have constant advantage on you all the time because you
Yeah.
can't see it coming. Even if you try to make the argument, it's like, well, but they fire the thing, so it's going to come within my 10 feet before it gets me. It's like, well, that doesn't matter. You saw it 10 feet too late. Like it's coming at
Yeah.
you at especially when it leaves, it's going to be picking up speed as it's coming at you. It's like you're not, that doesn't matter. You can't say like, well, because I have blind sight out to this, that it would then affect. It's like, no, because you're not, it's not a matter of you like being able to hear or see the enemy, like preparing and seeing where they're aiming at you to then be able to dodge it. Like if they were in your blind sense, sure, you could. It's like Daredevil's, echolocation ability or whatever, where he hits sound and he can see like the silhouettes and things of people and then be able to tell like, their movements or what they might be doing and react accordingly. Or like, he can hear or listen or smell or even taste certain things in the air to give him an indicator. Whereas, but again, that only works in his effective range. Like if there's like a sniper dude, Daredevil's been taken out, I believe, a couple of times by super long range weapons and items and stuff like that. Like
Yeah.
to be fair with him, it's a superhero too. So there is also the added thing of like, oh yeah, once the projectile enters his field of whatever awareness, but even then, it's like that's not how the game works.
No, and,
Okay.
and and like if there was more of a support for it and like mechanically it would make sense, like I'd be more, accepting and akin to like being like, yeah, go for it. This is a great idea, but like there isn't. And
It's just not viable at all.
no,
And
and
again,
you're just making everything harder for yourself and making a
and
character.
consequently everybody else too.
The again, we've talked about this before. Like making your character do things poorly at the detriment to your team is not fun.
It's a no-no, man. It's an absolute no-no.
But
But that being said, I think that's about all we can really touch upon that particular subject. Again, I understand the trope. I get it. It's a fun concept, but it's a bad idea to purposefully cripple yourself, like for essentially just a concept. Because unless of course you work with your GM to give you, again, like Daredevil, you're blind, but due to some whatever weird magic, you have like echolocation now, and your blind sight is like 60 feet or something. That is the range of like most normal spells, whatever. You're not going to be good at long range. That's just the case. You're not going to have much long range at all because there's a limit, since even bats only have like blind sight 260 feet with echolocation. So it's like even that
yeah,
is still going to be
there's only so much you can do.
severely crippling and limiting you at that
And
point.
like and look, if that's what you want to play, like if you can come up with something with your DM that makes the character viable and you don't abuse that viability, like because the thing
Something
with this,
make a familiar that isn't so easily destroyed for some reason, right? It's you're able to see through it, but it can't, it
I
can't
don't
be
know,
easily destroyed by like AoE attacks or something. I don't know. Like
come up with something. Like there's also like you could argue maybe if you wanted to play something and say you play like a warlock, you could have like a pact or like an invocation that helps with your sight,
Yeah.
or makes it so like you have to spend resources, but it's better, stuff like that. Like there's ways to do it where like the blindness still affects your character's output, but also
Or
doesn't isn't
experience,
like
but
isn't a complete hindrance to everything that's
yeah,
going on.
it's not something that you're
But
deliberately, you know.
things like I'm gonna say a disability because it kind of is, especially in like combat. I don't mean
I
that you
believe
can't live
it's
a fulfilling life being
no,
blind. I'm
I believe
sure.
it, it is classified as a disability,
Yeah,
but
but
you
like
know,
bringing a character to a D&D group that has a disability, there are things you have to one like you're playing a fantasy character. It's a made up character. Um, and maybe someone wants to play D&D and they're blind. They want their character to be blind. Cool. But this is also a fantasy realm full of magic and swords
well,
and
and
mystical beings and
you're expected to also perform as such as an adventurer
and so
as
like
well.
again, we've talked about this like 100 times. Like bring characters that are ready for an adventure, or a character that was, maybe wasn't willing to start an adventure but was put into a situation where they had to and they've had to buck up or shut up.
Yeah.
And it's hard to make a character that is, like this flawed or has this kind of issue and still interact with the game the way everyone else is going to
I mean, I
interact.
was gonna say what it really comes down to is the fact that fifth edition is just severe. Like I believe they have actually introduced a couple of supplements and obviously items and things to help offset those kinds of characters and to provide
Yeah.
them with a little bit
Like
more
prosthetic limbs,
versatility. Next,
prosthetic eyes, and
exactly.
things to like give your character some flavor and flesh out like, oh, this terrible thing happened to them, but now they're,
Or it's just a
you know,
natural thing that
yeah,
they're
that too.
using this thing as a means of
Yeah.
helping them to accomplish their dreams, their
Or
goals, and stuff,
even just a cool way
ambitions.
to show that, hey, this character came from some shit and is now dealing with it the way that they know
Yeah.
how
And
and
they have like a
coming up with a way.
they have a dope magic prosthetic.
It's
Like
cool. It does. Is there still a hindrance? Yes,
you
because those prosthetics are not made out of human flesh, which means certain spells might affect them differently. They're not
might affect them
indestructible, all of
differently.
them.
Not all of
Uh,
them.
there's things like, anti-magic fields are gonna fuck up your
Yep.
character.
Or
There's
like dispel
also
magic
how
things.
about
Like,
how about the fact that all of those prosthetics require attunement, so you are down in
yep.
attunements. So there are still flaws. There are
Yep.
still
There
mechanical
are resources
flaws
applied
that you
to it.
have to juggle that don't fuck up the game for everybody around you and don't grog down and ruin the pacing of something. But yeah, I like the idea of wanting to do stuff like this. Just you
Yeah.
gotta,
It's always interesting. And it's a
don't
good
don't take
it's
advantage of it.
yeah, well, and also don't expect again if you want your character to have such a feature, like don't expect it again to just be like, oh well, I mean, I want my character to be blind, and I'm circumventing this with this particular like mechanic or thing. But it's like, okay, again, with the familiar, if you're gonna send in your only source of vision to like get in the literally the melee of combat, like in the thick of it, yeah, they're probably gonna attack them. Or
Yeah,
again,
it's strategery.
there is
Sorry.
always the case of familiars being destroyed by AoE attacks. Like that is the prime example. That's one thing about like uh familiars at higher levels. It gets way harder for them to kind of be involved in the
Yeah.
combat in any way, shape, or form
I
because of
mean,
such huge AoE effects that
yeah.
constantly kind of
What
happen.
what I would do is I'd send up my familiar up into the sky
Yeah.
or like up against the ceiling, overlooking the whole battlefield of where we're fighting, so that my
Mm-hmm.
I can see myself move, you know, and see the battlefield move around, so that my character isn't right next to their familiar, because familiar doesn't have to be right next to you for you to look through
Nope.
its eyes. And the reality is like that would be a cool way of describing why your character, like someone walks up behind him and they block it without even looking because they can see them coming up behind. Like
Mm-hmm.
that's a cool,
It's
if you
a
do it in
cool
such a
flavor
way.
thing, you
Well, but
know?
guess what? That familiar, it's not going to be able to do anything else while it's doing that. And
Not
like,
really.
if you have to make it do something, then you're going to sacrifice your sight for that turn or for that
Or
whatever.
at least, to a certain extent, depending on the
Yeah,
positioning of your familiar. You can still do certain things with the familiar while still maintaining your sight, but it'll be way harder. It'll be far more difficult. And obviously, that is maybe some of the appeal of it,
yeah.
right? and that's fine. But in regards to this post, be fair about it. Like you can't expect your familiar to all of a sudden be completely and utterly invincible simply because it's your only source of vision that you chose to give it. You have to own up to your decisions, and if that's the case, you have to own up to the drawbacks that come
Yeah,
with it.
100%.
All right.
I think we got
Yeah, I
everything out of
think,
that we could. I think we did
quite
good.
frankly, let's go ahead and move on to the next one. By all means, Sammy, take it away.
This is the complex.
Yes.
Okay, we come up with another one titled DM has a god complex. This is going to be short, so let's run through some stuff. Cast is a DM, has a DMPC druid. The OP has a sorcerer and other characters that are irrelevant to the story. Great cast.
Got
Really in-depth
straight to the point.
cast.
Yeah, straight to the point.
I
Honestly,
do love that
I
actually
respect it.
sometimes.
I mean, hey, if it's the thing that's mostly applicable, I no issue at all.
Yeah. Wait, what? Camping started abruptly after DM left a West March server due to unfair use of server rules. We were on a one shot that the DM ran. He asked us if we wanted to continue the one shot on a different place. Okay, interesting. To switch servers. He made his own West
Yeah.
March where we continued it as a
Already
camping.
some
What's
red
a
flags showing
camping?
up.
Do you know what that is?
Uh
I am not sure.
I am not entirely sure
I wonder
myself.
if it's just a style of game, but
I assume it
let's
might be like
whatever. Maybe
they
it's like
maybe
the title of it or
they're
something. I don't know.
stopping. It might be like a play by post kind of style where you're just
Maybe.
like, hey, we'll keep maybe continuing the story as long as it kind of
I
can
don't know. It's
go. But yeah, I'm not familiar with
Yeah,
that
it's
term
something.
either.
So the DMPC that joined us from the start was a Furbolg druid that was an exceptionally high level relative to our characters. There's been some fights the DMPC simply decimated while our low level characters barely got a turn in combat, sometimes none if the DMPC was on top initiative. That was fine, and I just went with it to honor the friendship that I built with him in the previous server. What cut it for me was the one time his DMPC got assassinated for some reason and rose up as a goddess. Well, it turns out she was one all along. What do you know? Now we have a god on the team. Good luck being challenged by anyone. The
Yeah.
assassins were dismissed, as in there's no trace of them nor plans of the DM set to add them to the plot. Made me feel like he just made that up to make his DMPC a god. I asked him about it and presented my complaint about the situation, and the DM said, if you don't like how I run my campaign, then just leave. I was shocked that he wasn't planning to do anything and just put me in a you are free to leave situation, and I did. I said, fine, I guess I'll be pulling out of this campaign. That prompted other players playing with us to do the same too. Some of them had the same complaints but didn't want to confront or be rude about it. Uh, and that sent the DM into a fit, calling us bad players and eventually kicked us all from the server we played in. If you if I have anything to tell Reddit about this, if you feel like something is bad, the one to speak up and save the other play be the one to speak up and save the other players the hassle. I I really do like kind of appreciate that because some people it's really hard to say something.
Confrontation
I've
is always terrifying and uncomfortable. Like,
I've had this issue before in my games, even though I've known these people forever and very much enjoy playing with them. Sometimes someone doesn't want to speak up or feels wrong in some way, but it doesn't want to ruin it for everybody else. And
yep.
like
It's a very
having
common thing.
again, communication is key. This kind of self-insert, you know, what is it, Mary Sue? What's the male version of that?
Gary Stew
Gary
is
Stu. Like,
yeah, it's
when a DM makes a DMPC, there's two. I feel like there's like three sides to this coin. It's a very strange coin. Um, there's the overpowered, godlike DMPC that does everything for the party or themselves and doesn't care how the story goes and just wants to do that. Then there's the opposite side, which is a slightly underleveled DMPC that wants to be there with the party, helps the party out when they can, but also is
Mhm.
constantly
In danger of,
in danger.
biting
And
dust.
when I say underleveled, I'm not talking about the DMPC that's like 10 levels under.
No,
I'm
no, no.
talking like, your party's level, say 14 and the DMPC's level 10,
Yeah.
where like they're still competent. They
They
can
can
still
still
do,
offer some
they
support,
they
yeah.
definitely can. And like sometimes they can make the difference. Albeit most of the time when you have those kinds of DMPCs, the DMs don't run them very well because they're more focused on the combat and not
Well,
what
on
they're.
the enemies, yeah. The most
Yeah.
that's all
Which I
obviously a
hate.
great time to delegate. You just
Yeah,
delegate the
I
DMPC
personally
to the
hate.
players.
Yeah, I personally hate that because if you're gonna give us another character on our team, play him like you would be playing a character. So,
Mhm.
actually strategize, actually think about what you're doing. Don't just do the same thing every turn. Think about what you have in your arsenal, especially as you
Mhm.
get to high level. Which is why I prefer to not have them. Just un todo, as they say in Spanish. I fucking butchered that, but whatever.
Mhm.
Just don't have it. Um,
I mean, I definitely feel
like
there are.
story wise, it's fine. If you have a guy that travels with you and all that stuff, great. Like, is a part of the story, loves the characters, is a main reason that they might have formed a party. Like, there's a relationship there. We love that. Stop putting him in all your combats. And if you're gonna put him in combats, maybe have him just be more of a supportive role.
Well, I was
Don't have
gonna
him running
say
around in there because it's just not.
that's the biggest thing I would say. Like I absolutely believe that there are fair, reasonable, effective ways of applying DMNPCs.
Mhm.
I've had to use some at times in my own games because usually if we just don't have enough people, right? I think that's usually the biggest reason that a lot of
That is,
DMs.
yeah, I've never run into that, but I feel
Yeah,
like that would be a big
I
thing.
that is the only time I've ever really done it. Personally, I'm also of the mind that like if you don't need one, then you shouldn't have one. Like it just like I can say like it may not necessarily hurt to have a DM NPC so long as again the GM usually has them take a back seat. If it's like because they can also sometimes be used as like narrative driving tools, right? If certain
Yeah.
players might get stuck on a puzzle or just in terms of like, well, what do we do now? The GM can then kind of use the DMPC as a mouthpiece to be like, well, here's maybe an idea that you could go check out, or here's maybe a solution to the problem. But it's definitely a thing where it's like if you don't have enough players, sometimes you got to give them a little bit of support. And normally the DM NPCs absolutely should be, if they are going to be a like more permanent fixture in the party, more consistent, supportive. They should be like more support role. And
Yeah.
I hesitate to use the term heal bot because that, but it because again, like Sam said, it's like they should still be playing like strategically. They should still be playing in terms of like as a character or as a character being in the campaign in the world. They want to be helpful. They want to do probably what the most effective thing is, and they probably want to whatever. And again, that's why if there's like a huge combat and the party has a DM NPC for whatever reason, either as a tag along or as a permanent member, and there's a big combat for the GM to have to manage, I am still a huge fan or subscriber of delegate. Let the players control the DM NPC to do their best. It's not always going to work great. It's going to be difficult sometimes depending on your players. And if you don't have to use one, then I would absolutely suggest, or my personal advice would be don't. If you do not have
Yeah.
to, then it's probably better just not to overall. But in regards to this, it also is clear, this GM for this story clearly had even worse off a god complex. Because I don't think like he says that there was apparently a decent amount of them. So I don't believe he ever actually had a real reason to put a DM NPC as a permanent member of the party, aside from him just trying to live his own personal power fantasy by the sounds of it. He literally made his own DM NPC a risen goddess after being assassinated. And that, like, why? You
Yeah,
you already
I
have other gods. You can just be a god. Like, what is the point of this? And you're still allowing them to tag with the party and basically handle encounters for them. You were even before that. Like, why? Just play the game by yourself at that point. Then, like, run a solo thing where you writ all of the encounters and you literally just role play with yourself. And it's like sometimes it can be funny to see a GM do that with their characters, but it's a little sad when you're doing it literally by yourself. Like
it
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 kind of
is a
defeats
bit.
the purpose. Like it's don't get me wrong. It's like, hey, if you really just are fiending for some D&D, I mean, because I will say there are some actual created modules though that work for a solo adventure, and those are interesting because it
Yeah.
literally is like you're reading through the book and like having those actual encounters. Like, I mean, You can maybe act them out if you want. I don't think that, it might be a little silly, but it's like, hey, you're having a solo adventure, do what you want to do to have the most fun. But you read through the book and you just see the people, what they say, and I think there's like predetermined, responses that you can choose to, and that is what maybe influences the path you take in the book. But aside from that, like, go do that then. Why are you trying to be with all these other people if you're literally just trying to have your own personal power fantasy? It defeats the purpose, and it just makes the entire situation infinitely worse for almost everybody, because even the GM himself is clearly wanting like the applause and the respect and admiration of his players, but being like, look how powerful my personal DMPC god is. It's like, well, yeah, they
Yeah,
would
this
be.
isn't fun or entertaining
No,
or
it's
like
not even interesting. It offers nothing, and it's a complete waste of almost everybody's time because no one is actually getting what they signed up for or are looking for.
yeah. And like that's I think if you're gonna include stuff like that, especially the DMPCs or like you're gonna be with the players in that sense, like I think there's a lot that goes into it that people don't realize, and there's a lot of work that I think has to be done to make sure that you're not stepping on your players' toes because that's unfortunately just kind of how the DMPC tends to work is that you are kind of stepping into the player side of things, which can be very, you know, up and down in terms of whether or not you're actually doing things in a way that is helpful to your players and not.
Or fun at all.
Yeah, fun would also
Like
be.
that's the big, I mean, here, clearly his DMPC is helpful because he just steamrolls through every freaking encounter,
Yeah,
like, for them. But that's not fun. Just because you can say you objectively helped them doesn't mean that that's actually enjoyable. You literally just completely disintegrated one of the three pillars of D&D right there. So what are we doing? What is
yeah,
this
why
for? Like, this is always the question that I feel like people and GMs and players should ask themselves is
why
why are we making this decision right now? Why are we choosing to do this like this? What is the intention? What is the overall goal we're trying to get to? And how
yeah.
is this actually conducive or helpful to getting there?
I think like, having a DMPC that ties into the story and maybe helps keep your players um kind of on the storyline is not a bad idea if you do it
Yeah.
correctly and it's not
Offer
too
some support
railroady.
narratively. Yeah.
Giving your players like a reason to do stuff because this DMPC is a character that they care about is also a good option. But just making a DMPC for the sake of, well, I want to be a player too, it kind of sounds to me that like you should just not DM. If you,
But that's the thing, though. They want that control still, though.
yeah,
They want to
obviously,
have a very specific experience, and so they're like, if I GM, I can obviously give myself that very specific experience. But it's
yeah,
like,
that's kind of a whole different issue. Is like you kind of have to learn to leave it a bit. Just kind of leave what you necessarily want the whole time to the side as a DM. It's not always going to be something that you get to do.
I mean, whether you're a player or a GM, one of the beauties of this game or the biggest appeal, which can also sometimes be the absolute most horrendous traumatic thing about this game, is its unpredictability in terms of any table you sit down at, any campaign that you join. Like, the one of the biggest appeals and one of the is the excitement of like not knowing what to really expect, at least in terms of the story, right? In terms of how the story is going to progress, what's going to happen. You can add on your own backstory and have your character, affect things, but you never quite know exactly, at least normally, how the GM is going to lay things out, what they're going to hand you, what they're going to present to you, and where you're going to be able to go. But, that also means on the flip side is you might not always get that most satisfying, conclusion or climactic finish to your character's story or story arc or whatever. And I get that it can be unfortunate. I've had that myself before, and it wasn't necessarily a bad thing. It wasn't necessarily like, oh, well, that just, it was kind of disappointing. And that happens
Yeah.
sometimes, but you still had a good time, hopefully, in other areas. But again, that doesn't mean you should go off and try to make your own game just to explicitly provide yourself only, or even specifically yourself with the very specific type of like satisfying conclusion or narrative that you wished that you could have gotten as only a player. As a GM, your responsibility now isn't to yourself, it's to your players, to your table. It's to
Yeah.
make sure that everyone, everyone does include you, to be fair, but you are still, because you are in that position of power, you have a responsibility to make sure that everyone else, your players, are enjoying. It is primarily still your job to spotlight them and to make sure that they are enjoying and having a great time. That is what the GM role means. And like Sammy
Yeah.
said, if you're looking for a more personal, conclusion, climax, or satisfaction, then you're just going to have to also take the risk that comes with that and joining some games or things and doing your best to, get that satisfying conclusion to a character or whatever, with the potential risk that you might not ever get it. It might not never come.
Yeah.
But unless you got any other comments or thoughts, Sammy, I do believe that we probably have hit the nail on the head with this one here, in our humble opinion, of course. Let's go ahead and move on to the next story. This one is titled DM Doesn't Take Criticism Well, Ends Campaign by Mighty Possum King. A few months ago, I joined a homebrew campaign with strangers from the internet. The premise was that the PCs were fallen gods that were reawakened after thousands of years and sought to regain their power, starting at level 1. It was the DM's first time DMing, and as we know, that can always be an interesting tale indeed. We all met on session 0. Everyone was super nice and cool, and we all got along really well. The campaign started and everyone was really good at role-playing. We had a ton of fun in-character interactions and everyone seemed very invested. After playing for about 2 months, about 7 sessions in, we reached our first big milestone in the story. At the end of the session, the DM asked for our opinion on the story so far. In my personal opinion, the story seemed a bit lackluster. It kind of read like a first draft, and where a lot of things seemed improvised or sprung out of nowhere. Even that, early on, the DM had already had to retcon a few plot holes because he changed his mind about some big plot points. See, that's, that is a slippery slope there. When you start trying to, like, on the fly, change up, certain things arbitrarily that you haven't really considered or talked with your players about, and aren't necessarily even in regards to your players, but more so just about, again, the specific kind of like narrative or story climax or conclusion you're looking for, instead of, again, being more adaptive and flexible with real time, actions, consequences, and events that transpire in the game. There was this constant feeling that we were just thrown from NPC to NPC. Like a constant, hey, go talk to X. And then X would be like, hey, go talk to Y in the mountain. But this is a new DM that seems like he's trying very hard to learn the ropes, so I didn't say all of that. I gave a very nice and sugar-coated version about how the story needed a bit of work. Always trying to be very reassuring and cheering on his progress, and everyone else seemed to do more or less the same thing. The DM nodded along to what everyone said and had to go soon after, so the session ended. Later, the DM sends a message saying he wanted more specific criticism about specific things. So I give him some pointers on using specific points in the story as an example, always trying to keep a positive tone and pointing out how some of those things could be changed. DM thanks me for my endpoint, and we separate and go our separate ways. Next session starts, and DM seems to be on the verge of tears. He says he sees no point in continuing, given we all hate the story he worked so hard on. And those are the words he used. Everyone, including myself, seemed very confused, and we tried to reassure him, but he was adamant that this is an utter failure. And then he ends the session, and we all leave. That was the last time I saw him. Edit. Because you all seem to think we said nothing good when he asked us for feedback, guys, we complimented a lot of things. Sorry if I didn't make that obvious in my post. I remember we talked about how he made really engaging, interesting NPCs and role played them really well. He also ran combat really smoothly and balanced his encounters very well. We said all of this to him repeatedly, along with other compliments about small moments that we liked. None of us thought that our criticisms on the story so far were going to affect him to such a degree. None of us had plans on dropping out or trying to end the campaign. Two of the players were very experienced DMs that gave him a lot of advice on different methods they use that might help him build a story or prepare better. We were all really sad and disappointed when he announced ending the campaign. In post.
This is a tough one.
Yeah, this is kind of why I was interested in this one, exactly because of the nature of it, in that there doesn't seem to be any real bad guys or good guys necessarily in this. This is just, I think, a case of, and it happens where, especially for brand new GMs or just people in general, where criticism in any shape, form is incredibly difficult to both, receive and even deliver, depending on how you're trying to do it. Like, to me, from what I can gather from this story, is my first instinct is like, yeah, this GM, he was brand new, he was trying his best, he seemed to be really enthusiastic, and he initially wanted to get potentially better. And he asked like all of his players probably to, hey, send some feedback, let me know what I'm doing wrong or whatever. And maybe just got a little bit more than he, I guess, maybe expected or bargained for, where he probably just got like a bombardment. And actually, maybe I shouldn't say bombardment, but he was sent like a number of things from probably multiple people, all like kind of saying like, yeah, this kind of needs work, or this isn't that great, or this, da, 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 da. And maybe even some of them weren't particularly nice about it. Maybe some of them were destructive and harmful and not particularly considerate or tactful in their delivery, and that could also have a huge effect on a new GM's confidence and their motivation. But let's even go out on a limb, because the OP did say that apparently they all seem kind of confused and they all seem to be very complimentary to him. So let's say that they all did do their best to be as considerate and tactful in delivering their criticism. It is also not an unlikely thing to happen where a person just, you made something and you thought it was really good, you thought you had a really lot of fun time making it and doing it, and then somebody gets it and they're kind of just like, like, yeah, it's not bad, but it's the thought that counts. It's like that can still kind of suck. It can still hit your confidence and your motivation. And if you get hit by that from multiple sources, it becomes even harder to be able to, like, feel motivated to do something. If you feel like all you did was just utter garbage, right? All that work, all that effort, time, and energy feels wasted, and just like, oh well, yeah.
It's tough because like especially if you're a new DM and you're trying to figure things out, and maybe you didn't think it was that bad, and so you were like, no, I'm okay with the criticism, and it's overwhelming, but I think unfortunately, like, the intention here wasn't bad, and it sucks that the game is now ended. Like, I would try to reach out to this person and just be like, hey, or like, hope you understand, like, we didn't mean this to like make you feel bad or something like that.
Yeah.
But I don't know, like, I'm also kind of in the realm of like, this is a little bit, if they weren't being rude
it's
and
a
the
bit of an
person
overreaction.
and the person asked, what are you supposed to do? Are you supposed to lie?
I mean,
I don't, I don't
that's
know.
the thing. You know, that's what we were saying of like it is incredibly hard to even if you do everything right, right? If you are trying to essentially offer criticism to something, even if you do your best to be again careful and considerate and polite or whatever, you're just like, hey, this is just how I feel about this. That regardless of what you do, at the end of the day, the reality and truth is that you cannot make anyone feel something that they are not choosing to feel themselves.
True.
You just can't, you know, that person, regardless of what you do, is going to choose how they receive what you are trying to convey or give them. And even if you're like nice about it, they can still just be like, but you did it anyway. You didn't like it. I like, or you know, they can be like, even if somebody's like, this is utter freaking garbage. You suck. And you can be like, huh, well, what parts didn't you like? And you'll be like, this part. How can you even believe it? And they're just like, huh, okay, well, I can definitely see how you might be frustrated or how that could be frustrating or aggravating. And I will take that into consideration. You know, it's like it really does come down to the receiver at the end of the day to be able to choose how they're going to use the input and criticism or thoughts and whatever of other people and how they're if they're either going to use it, you know, constructively or if it's going to be destructive to them. It really is their choice. Um, and I guess the GM for this story shows that all the stuff that happened, you know, was only really destructive. It was or too destructive for him, which is unfortunate. And you really do hate to see it, especially if he was like, you know, a new GM who legitimately was interested in having fun or wanting to put in work to like do this and
Yeah,
that, you
that's the
know,
part that really hurts, I think.
it's yeah, it's sad. It's really sad and unfortunate that had to happen. Um, and you know, hopefully, like Sam suggested, you know, maybe you're right, Sammy, that they reached out to him afterwards, and or well, no, I guess he said that was the last time that he saw him, so I guess he maybe cut them off and whatever, and that's their decision, but
I
it
mean, yeah,
definitely
to me, that's also not exactly a mature way to handle it, but I don't know how old this person is. I don't know
no,
what they do in terms of how their, social battery and all that stuff works, but like
I mean, I
it's
don't
not
know.
exactly that's also not exactly the mature way to handle it. As much as you're like, I don't want to hear criticism, cutting everybody off and running away isn't also it's not the answer either. Um, if these people were like super mean, I think I'd
Yeah,
understand.
if they were assholes and do like 100% leave because you're not only are you not getting anything positive, but you're in fact you are taking in toxicity and poison and venom and shit that is bad for you. And they are clearly not having your best interest at heart. But that is vastly different than, you know, a group of friends who are legitimately trying to be constructive and to build you up. They're not trying to tear you down at least again from what the OP has been saying, and I'm inclined to believe it doesn't seem like anything said here is like overtly unbelievable, you know, even the way that he presents it. But again, we could be wrong. We don't know for certain. But I'm gonna go out on a limb and say that they did their best to be nice and
Yeah,
complimentary and sensitive to his or aware of the GM's maybe a little sensitivity.
yeah. I it's just an unfortunate
It's
situation all
yeah, it
around.
is. It always is, and it's just you know that comes with again having to interact with people. Um, but I'm gonna say with that, I think we probably just we said all we need to kind of say on that particular one. You want to go ahead and take the next one, Sammy?
Sure. We have a game without the game without treasure. Um, this happened a few years back, and I counted as the worst campaign I've been in. I played a wood elf open hand monk. We started at level 3, and each got to pick an uncommon magic item. I
Hmm.
picked I picked the winged boots.
As you do,
Well, yeah,
classic.
my games when we start with a magic item where you get to pick magic items because we're starting at a higher level, the winged boots now count as a rare item.
Yeah. I mean, again, and that's not unfair because of the fact that they are very busted. The fact that they are uncommon is highly
because
busted.
the only other flying, well, there's two other flying items: the carpet and the broom. The carpet
I mean,
is
there are some
way,
other items
I
too, to
know,
be
but
fair,
like
but
the
yeah.
basic ones. The carpet, way higher rarity. The broom is also uncommon, I believe,
Yeah.
but you have to ride it, therefore you can't just willy-nilly do
Yeah.
whatever you
It's
want
it's
on it.
not it's not an attunement item, but it is more like a vehicle in that, hey, it's a broom that you always have to have with you. And then if you start trying to ride it, you have a high chance you can get knocked off of it.
Well, it's
Or
also
it,
the fact
it
that
can
you
be
can't,
blasted or attack
you can't
itself.
you can't ride it and use a two-handed weapon. It's hard to
Yeah.
shoot off of it, etc., etc.
Like I know
Um,
freaking Vax from Critical Role, she used a broom for a long time
yeah, and
like
it took
that.
time for her to be able to use it in
But
combat.
she still had to learn how to use it in combat. And
Yeah,
even then, there were still many moments where it was like she couldn't use it for certain reasons or whatever, or she got knocked off of it and took damage and
yeah.
shit from it. So,
But we look at, he said, I picked the wing boots. Seems like a good start. Well, the DM gave me a warning right from the start that any abuse would get the boots taken away from me. I can play nice, so that was fine. It was all down here from there, though. Our initial
it's
introductory
already a
adventure,
huge red flag.
yeah, involved saving a town from some anomaly in the woods. That was all good, and I was happy to be helping people. No treasure, of course, because of the nature of the threat, but that was fine. The main arc of the campaign was introduced fairly soon after, when we reached a large town slash small city and fought some cultists. These black robe menaces attacked with blood magic and summoned shadow creatures, and never carried too much as pocket change. The most valuable things on their person or in their hideout were the daggers that they used to cut their hands for the blood magic. This would prove to be a constant disappointment throughout the campaign. Now we get to the bright spot. At level 4, when we cleared out a cave where some monsters had been attacking caravans, um, had stored their spoils. We picked up a little bit of gold, but made some difficult decision to return the stolen merchandise. I had a couple dozen gold pieces at this point, and that would be the high point of the game. We infiltrated a noble's house. He was aligned with the cultists and won the fight, but were chased out of town by the guard before we could investigate further or even loot the bodies. We visited other towns and cities and fought more cultists with no money. I used the last of my gold to bribe some city guards as part of our investigations. We were level 5 at this point.
Mm.
We escaped an exploding city, more cultists, shadow creatures, and no loot, and tried to stay ahead of the rumors that we caused the destruction. We had to fight more shadow creatures that were terrorizing a small town, which turned out to be an illusion. Yes, the entire town.
So many goddamn
Um,
shadow creatures.
a corrupt
Jesus.
dock master in a port city tried to have us killed. Neither his person nor his desk had so much as a copper piece. I did manage to grab a bottle of booze, but that was lost when we were unceremoniously transported to a desolate mirror dimension the very next session. Yes, it was connected to the cult, and there was nothing. Now, it wasn't that there was nothing at all. Our bard was lucky enough to acquire instrument of the bards very shortly before she started dating the DM. Yes, when they broke up.
Oh
Yes, when
no.
they broke up not that long after, she left the group and took it with her. Not that there was another bard in the party. By the time the game ended at level 8, it had been multiple levels and months in both in game and out since we had seen so much as a copper piece for that entire time. Our sustenance was the druid's good berries. My only regret, aside from being in the game at all, was that it ended before I had the opportunity to dramatically leave the group to find work as a carpenter. And as the cherry on top, the DM told me at multiple points when I complained about the lack of gold, "You have the winged boots," which I was not allowed to abuse, i.e., is used for anything but flavor RP and in combat movement. When the game ended, I was poorer than when it began, mundane items included. Um, this is something that really pisses me off. I
Yeah.
understand that you don't want to like just give shit away, but never in a D&D game should your players not be able to afford basic lodging, unless they make a decision that keeps them from doing that. Um, right away, they cleared out shit for a town. Why is there no reward?
I mean,
Why is there no reward? There's no,
when
they got nothing for helping them,
not even just no
not even
reward.
road supplies. I'm not saying give them gold, but even like supplies for the roads that they're not hungry.
Something, rations or
Some form
whatever,
of
like,
hospitality for saving people's lives.
or just, yeah, reward.
Um,
Like they would be thankful and
you're
appreciative, and maybe they couldn't share a lot,
you're
but
telling me they couldn't pilfer anything from a mansion. You're telling me that a captain who had enough money to pay for their assassination didn't keep any valuable things on them. Um, the cultists. I understand that, a lot of enemies aren't just going to have loot, falling out of their pockets. But like,
you are quite a yawny boy over
I
there,
don't
my
know, dude,
dude.
it's hitting me real hard. There's like, it just doesn't make. I'm trying real hard not to. The thing that bothers me is like, it doesn't have to be straight gold. It doesn't have to be like a bunch of magic items and a bunch of shit. Like, I get that. Um, but like, it should be something. Like, my character should be able to go to a bar after an adventure and hang out and drink and be able to get a room.
I mean, at the very least, just a room. Like, don't even get me wrong. There are plenty of games where like lodgings and stuff are expensive, more expensive than trying to just camp or whatever. But it's like for D&D, this is always, I think, a huge thing in regards to D&D is the whole acquisition of loot overall. It's like, yes, overabundance of loot can, depending on what the items are, quickly overwhelm your players or make them run the risk of making them exceedingly more powerful than their current level would normally account for. But at the same token, constantly starving them out of any kind of like materialistic reward. I mean, that's again one of the big aspects of D&D. You do this so that your character can get cool, dope items for themselves or get money because a lot of things require a lot of gold.
Yeah,
Like
everything does.
spells, freaking, certain potions, equipment, items. Like if they want to do a shopping episode, like they need funds and capital to really get the most out of this game. And not only that, the game is designed for that. Literally at level 8 or whatever, they're probably supposed to be getting anywhere from like, 10,000 gold or more. I think at that point, I forget the exact ratio or whatever, but there's like literally a thing, I believe, in the DM guide about supplying a certain amount of rewards and gold or finances or items or whatever, depending on what tier of level your party is at. And it's like that's one of the biggest things because once you get higher levels, so much stuff requires a lot of gold. Like resurrection spells, those require a lot of freaking gold's worth of stuff. And you need to get items that use that. And it's part of the game and it's what helps balance it. It's what helps makes it worthwhile and gives that, again, true sense of accomplishment and reward at times, barring just obviously doing the good deed that you did. It's still nice to be like, hey, we got something really cool that can help us increase our characters and provide more interest in the game. And him, essentially just hoarding any kind of material gain or boon or bonus is just that's asinine, man. I mean, it's akin to like a GM hoarding levels from players, where it's like we have been playing for like a year and we've leveled up once the entire time. Like that's to me, that's kind of crazy. That's insane. It's like let them level up. Like what? Like I get it. Some people have this whole thing about, oh, well, we like a very specific level or tier of D&D because then, we can use these monsters and still be, scary and terrifying. And I'm like, to me, that just sounds like you're either being a lazy GM or maybe you're just not very talented then. If you can't create any kind of intense or challenging or stimulating kinds of encounters or combat for a higher level party, even a bit, don't get me wrong, it's harder, but that's also kind of comes with the fun because you also get access to just all of the monsters and other things that you can use and you can tweak them and homebrew them as you need, of course, but it provides so much more freedom and people who want to maintain this little bubble, this little box. You want to keep your players and your game and your everything, this little box. And it's just like I don't find that particularly fun, engaging, or interesting. Like,
Not
you
not
know,
really. Like especially when
give them something worth all of the effort and time they've put in, because that's what they're doing. The players are putting in a
it
lot
reads
of fucking time.
adversarial, like we've talked about before. It just reads so
Yeah.
adversarial. Like you just don't. I don't know what. Like what are they? So if they didn't have a druid on their team, how would they eat? You know, are they hunting every night? Do they even have
That's
camp
that's
supplies?
what I would be like. It's like I
Like
guess they could hunt if they have like ranged attacks or whatever.
like if you wanted to do like a survival-y horror game, like a survival-y game, that's fine. But like that doesn't seem to be what this was supposed to be, and it's just kind of weird. If I'm gonna be honest, like it
Yeah.
just
Well,
feels
I mean,
weird.
even the straight up like threat at the top of like don't abuse the item that you chose or you'll have them
Yeah.
taken
Well,
away. And it's like,
like no offense,
well,
if you
who
don't want them to have that item, just don't let them have the item.
that's what I
Don't
mean.
be weirdly
And
passive
not
aggressive.
like who exactly determines what's considered abusive? How what is
Yeah.
an abuse like define that for me real quick. Because the boots of, the winged boots, they're used for flying. They have a limit. They have a specific limitation in the description of the item itself. And if that isn't enough for you, then exactly how do you quantify what is abusive and what isn't in the use of this item? Like, come on.
Yeah, it's very strange to me. It doesn't seem like there's actually any rhyme or reason except for the fact that the DM wants to control
I was
what's
gonna
going
say, yeah,
on.
literally one of the comments down here says it, like, says it best. He's like, hey, this sounds like a DM with control issues, where they had issues with players who were clever with their magic items, either found or bought, that made encounters not go the way the DM thought they should go. So instead of learning to adapt to the players, they decide to limit them in any way possible, even to the point of threatening them if they actually use the one item they gave them in any useful way, the normal definition of abuse them for people like this. And yeah, I feel like that sums this up pretty freaking perfectly. Is like that's what this seems like to me, where you are just trying to actively limit any and all like variables for your thing. You want to just be this is all it is. And honestly, even with they constantly fighting shadow demons. It's incredibly and I mean I assume these shadow monsters or demons maybe are different. I severely hope that he's not actually just using just the run-of-the-mill shadow demon for all of these freaking encounters where you're just like, hey, more shadow demons. Hey, more shadow demons. Hey, you're getting more shadow demons here now. Yeah. And it's like, how the freaking uncreative and unoriginal, unimaginative can you get, my dude, if you're just going to use the same freaking monsters almost every time? And then you happen to then blame all of the negative stuff that the shadow monsters did on the party, which then gets them run out of every goddamn town. Why are
Literally.
you running them out of every goddamn town? This is ridiculous, dude.
It's like, what are they supposed to do?
I mean, another comment literally says it too. It's like, do you want murder hobos? Because this is how you get murder hobos. It's like, you know what? This is probably the only literally legitimate time where murder hoboism would be perfectly valid. And I would absolutely advocate 100% for it to be like, you know what? Let's just go ahead and start stealing and destroying everything around us. Because if everybody's going to treat us like that anyway, despite all of our best efforts, you can only treat somebody like something for so long until they actually become that thing, whether they were or not before. And it's like, all right,
Yeah.
well, there you go. And that's again highly unfortunate. But other than that, I think we basically got everything we needed to out of that one. Any other thoughts you have for that one, Sammy? All
No,
right.
I think that's it for me. Like, I just stop doing this. Please.
You know what? Let's go ahead and move on to what I think might even be the highlight of today's episode. My favorite tale for the day, titled "Weekend at Harvey's" by World Gone Away. TLDR, I run a module written by a DM from another group. It goes off the rails. I allow it, and we have fun. And the other DM then completely loses their shit on me when they hear about it a few years later. So, this one is hopefully going to be fun. The original event happened a number of years ago, and the end of the event is fairly recent. So, a lot of the earlier details are a little bit fuzzy, but I can definitely relate at least the overall story. Back in my game store days, I was the DM of one of two consistent Dungeons & Dragons groups at my LGS. The other DM and I really weren't friends, and I can't say we even actually liked each other. But we had a mutual respect, and we had a few common players in our respective games. One day, the other DM approached me with a folder of papers. He said he had written a module that he was thinking of publishing, and he wanted to have the other DMs run the game with a few different groups at the same time so that he can have usable feedback. I told him I would read it, and then I would try running it with my group. It wasn't bad. Not exactly the best writing. There were some small spelling and grammar mistakes, but not anything incomprehensible. The plot basically involves a corrupt treasurer of a merchant guild blackmailing the player characters into doing a long series of side quests because he could very easily frame them for an event that they witnessed. The thing about this was that the writer spent a considerable amount of effort in writing contingencies so that the villain in the story could not be killed too early because it would ultimately result in the players getting framed for the event anyway. Kind of heavy-handed railroading, but I would give it a shot. The corrupt merchant guild treasurer, was named Harvey. He was a smarthy, swarthy, middle-aged half-elf with what was described as a manipulative personality. None of that is actually relevant to the story. My players decided that instead of trying to investigate the potential murder of another merchant guild office holder, they were going to try to loot Harvey's office before meeting him. While the players are looting, Harvey walks back into his office after paying for the hit on the other office holder, and one of the party members panics and wins the initiative before Harvey can even speak. 2 natural 20s later, Harvey is dead. Well, shit. The thing is, the way the module was written, every opportunity the players would have to kill him early, there would be witnesses and contingencies. This particular event, however, did not, and wasn't exactly planned for in the original writing, which you would think is kind of the whole point of him having you play test this with other players. But, continuing. When the players' characters search him and find out who he is, the players collectively panic and try to find a way to get out of the situation without having the whole town after them. So after about 30 minutes of in and out of character discussion among the players, they eventually came to an agreement. They were going to try to keep up a charade where everybody in town thought Harvey was still alive and that they were his best friends just looking out for him enough for the events of the story to somehow eventually resolve themselves. Hold on. You guys are actually going to try and do a weekend at Bernie's thing on this.
Yep.
Well, what other options do we have? We're in big trouble otherwise. And so every single time something like this happens, I am famous for saying 4 very specific words. Okay, roll for it. Potentially 15 sessions worth of dark political conspiracy, then proceeded, to metamorph into 22 sessions of black comedy gold. Finally, at the end, one of the other Merchant Guild office holders storms into Harvey's office while the player characters are in the next room trying to explain to a town guard that the reason Harvey is slumped in his chair is because he's drunk. In full view of the party and the guard through an open dividing wall, the other merchant proceeds to start stabbing Harvey multiple times. The other Merchant Guild member is promptly arrested for Harvey's murder, and the players are praised for being true friends of Harvey and the town and are invited to his funeral. God damn, they pulled it off. That's crazy. The hilarious thing is that this end result was, in fact, one of the possible endings that the original author had written into the module. Merchant Guild member murders Harvey and frees the PCs of the blackmail. My players just had a really messed up way of getting there, though. I went back to the other DM, handed him back the folder, told him that the players loved it, and we took a few liberties, but they ended up getting what we called ending C in the DM notes. He asked me for constructive criticism, and I gave him the pretty basic stuff, also mentioned a couple extra contingencies to try to keep the plot from being too inflexible. We didn't talk about this for a few years at this point, and then I bumped into his game group when I came back in to browse the scene at my LGS a couple of weeks ago. DM greeted me and explained that the group was playing the revised version of his module for the 4th time with different characters, trying to get each of the different endings. Wow, that's dedication. While we were talking, I ended up letting it slip just how off the rails that the module got when I ran it. I didn't think it was a big deal, but that DM proceeded to get fairly angry and offended. He asked me specifically what happened, and I explained that they rather accidentally killed Harvey at the very beginning of the module and pretended he was still alive for about 22 sessions just so that they would not get arrested. 2 of the players at the table started to just instantly burst into hysterical laughter. while one of the players looked genuinely horrified, and the GM himself got super pissed and raised his voice into a deafening timbre. You actually let them do that. That's not how the tone of the story is supposed to go. I tried telling him that it wasn't a big deal, told him it was just a game and that the players still had a blast, but he was not having any of it. He told me that if I was going to defile his writing, I should at least keep the tone consistent with the original work and tell him when it happens. I apologized, but he demanded that I leave the room, so I just turned and left. Over the ensuing week, I heard from a couple of different people that this guy has been cursing my name left and right, and how in some way I betrayed his trust by letting the game get that way. Worst yet, he somehow found my number so that he could actually directly bombard me with angry text messages about the subject. Tried to text him an apology and an explanation, but I'm pretty sure he blocked me, and I haven't talked to him since. Now, I understand that it was his brain baby of sorts, but I can't help but feel like this is a complete overreaction. Not to mention, he clearly had it edited such that he was happy enough to run it 4 times and was satisfied with it. I wouldn't personally hold this kind of thing against anybody that did this very thing with one of my games. So, what do you guys think? End post. Whew. Yeah. See, this guy, I think the theme for today is uber control freaks for GMs. This seems to be a reoccurring theme today, where it is just like, bro, what are you actually like upset about right now? Like,
That's a really weird.
what is the problem? What, like you said, that's not the tone that the story was supposed to go, but it's D&D. And you are literally giving this module that you are writing to other people to play test it for you, so that they can find certain, like, maybe issues, problems, little kinks or things here or there to iron out and fix, or even to just see how certain players of differing places or whatever react and respond to the module. This should just be a completely and utterly understandable and expected way to go, potentially. But clearly, this guy is just so utterly and completely control freak. And again, like the OP even said, it's like, oh, it's his brainchild or brain, whatever. But it's like, well, but you gave it out. You already should assume that there's gonna be maybe some wacky hijinks or weird twist changes and stuff to it. And I'm also confused about, like, when OP gave it back to him originally, was this not discussed at that time? Like, what was the actual, like, breakdown or critiques or advice or whatever that he gave him that all of a sudden, like, he didn't seem to have a problem with back then? And then all of a sudden he's like, oh, actually though, it got pretty crazy when I played it. Like, you didn't tell him that at the beginning? Why not? He didn't ask for maybe specific, like, notes on, like, how it progressed, like, how did they get to ending C with the characters? How did that come about for your particular group? Like, that's the whole point of having play tests. That's the whole point of having controlled groups, so that you see all the different, other way. It's a broken record here, as always. But overall, like, this makes it's even more aggravating, because this particular solution that the players came up with is god dang freaking hilarious. Literally Weekend at Bernie's this thing for 22 sessions. That's freaking funny. That's amazing how they were able to keep this up for as long as they did, until it literally did eventually solve itself. They played the role of Harvey. They probably used like a mixture of maybe, like, raise dead spells, other things, maybe like, I forget the spell that you can use to keep a corpse or a body from, like,
Gentle repose.
yes, gentle repose or whatever else, like, just, all kinds of stuff like that. That is very creative and interesting. I would love to have seen how that actually all played out in real game time. And the fact that this GM got so pissy and couldn't see the beauty and the genius in this stuff is crazy to me and super disappointing. It's like you gotta again let go a little bit, man. Maybe it's not the way you intended or wanted or expected, but that doesn't make it any less good or enjoyable, especially if the players are having fun and enjoying. Like, yeah, I just don't get why people have to be so goddamn freaking
Well,
like.
it's I want to give them credit for Weekend at Bernie. Like they actually did it. They did the impossible.
That's just crazy, bro. They actually like it. I mean, that's amazing. Everybody likes to pretend like they can try to do a weekend at Bernie's thing, but they literally did it for 22 sessions. That's what's even more hilarious is that it worked. I like the GM literally says, like, I'm famous for very, specific 4 words. Roll for it. So I have no doubt he has been constantly having them roll. Aside from I assume, the moments where they just have spells or magic that just helps them do things. But still, it's like you probably have to roll a performance check or something to make him still seem like he's actually alive. Like
Yeah.
and if it worked, then that is astounding. That they will forever remember that game from this point on. I can't imagine any of them would be able to truly ever like fully forget that game. Maybe they might forget some specifics, but that is a phenomenal genius thing. Like the OP himself says. But yeah, any other comments or thoughts you have on this, Sammy?
No, I think we got it.
Let's move on then to the next one. By all means, please take it away.
All right. This one is from a couple days ago. And it is problem player takes campaign hostage. This story takes place over the course of about 2-ish years. That's a very long time
That's not an insignificant amount.
to be playing with terrible people.
That is also a huge. Oh,
Um,
goodness.
But here we go. So details make it a little jumbled, so please bear with me. Let me start this story by setting the stage and important characters. DM, pretty okay guy, but a little hot-headed at times. In quotes, or in parentheses, this is mildly important. Me, Warlock Fighter multiclass, K, Monk, and Problem Player. There are a few other players, but they don't really play too much of a role in this story, so I'll bring them up as needed. We are playing Rime of the Frost Maiden, my first long-term campaign, and the first character that I genuinely enjoyed and cherished. Like I said above, I was playing an Aasimar Warlock fighter who was in the rhyme escaping a bounty on her head and was making ends meet by smuggling goods in and out of the 10 towns. I loved her so much. Love this.
I was gonna say, I think that's a great concept. I love that too. It's like really cool and interesting and highly applicable to the environment and the module itself.
The campaign starts and everything is fine for the most part. There are some in-character disagreements, but it was all in good fun, or so I thought. Kay's character constantly called my character evil for worshipping the Raven Queen, Hexblade Warlock. Before any of the problems actually start to arise, it's nonstop, and I quote, "You're a smelly, stinky Warlock drow." I worked with my DM when making my character, and we decided that she was technically a half elf. Her father, what?
Her father, it's some typos.
This is weird because she said Aasimar. Aasimar, not elves.
Yeah, well, half. So
Yeah.
you could be a half Azamar, half elf, technically.
No, that's
I
fair.
guess,
Yeah.
but
Her father being a dark elf, the only thing that made her stand out as anything else was the fact that she was well over 6 feet tall and built like a brick shit house. Loved it.
I still find it hilarious though that the problem player keeps calling like a smelly, stinky warlock drow. Like at one point, it does sound a bit problematic because it seems like maybe there might be a bit of like racism in there, maybe, but
Maybe.
it's also kind of really innocent that he's using terms like smelly, stinky. Like,
Yeah. But also probably really annoying.
yeah.
I found out after these first few sessions that this player was the kind to run ahead of the party without telling anyone in character and get into trouble. The first time this happened, they showed their true colors, and they showed their true colors was when we were exploring a mine shaft, and it turns out there was a Grell hiding in there under the specific condition written in the book, mind you, that would only come out if someone were in the room alone. Can you guess who found it and almost died as a result? If you guessed K, then you would be right. After a battle and K almost going down,
Almost.
they start to raise hell and say that it wasn't fair and they couldn't do anything. The Grell had them grappled and held in the air the majority of the fight, while everyone else peppered it with spells.
I mean, That's
The
just
the DM had to tell them that it wasn't an encounter that he made, that it was in the book and supposed to be there. We continue with our session and whatnot, having occasional outbursts from Kay, and the game was about the game being too hard for them, splitting the party and running off. Things do start to bubble when the DM punishes Kay in game for their antics. For example, they start acting out of line with their god's beliefs, and their god stops talking to them slash interacting with them. To which Kay whines and throws a fit over. A few more issues that we run into along the way include, but are not limited to, Kay threatening to burn down a man's house because they lost a fight. This fight was something set up by a fight club with rules. The whole point of the fights were to rank up and challenge the champ. Kay breaking into their mom's house through the chimney and getting their ass lit on fire. Funny. Kay constantly stealing from the people of the 10 towns, which, if you know, are starving and actively dying.
yeah, it's a huge
Kay
thing about it.
Yeah, Kay complaining almost every combat that it was unfair, unbalanced, and not fun, all while everyone else, myself included, was having a great time. Kay leaving call multiple times during sessions, especially during combat, and blaming it on ADHD. This specific one pissed both me and the DM off, who I stated was a hothead before. He did not take kindly to his time and resources being wasted. I was upset because I also have ADHD and I found ways to manage it during sessions, even offered to help Kay, but they always turned me down and just continued with leaving session and upsetting the DM over it, while continuing to blame it on the mental illness that them and I shared. ADHD is not a mental illness.
I mean, it can be impeding. It can definitely
Sure,
have a
but
certain amount
calling it an
of.
illness is a little bit much.
It depends on the severity of it. Sometimes it can be, depending on how intense it is. But in this particular case, I don't know. It's
no
it's
offense,
hard to say. Like,
no offense, you're just being a dickhead.
it seems like that seems the more likely
Yeah,
scenario here, is they're just being
the
very selfish and childish. Though to
yeah,
be fair, maybe they like honestly, again, from everything showcased here, it kind of seems like they are just exceedingly childish, almost like again, child brain. Because like even like I said, calling the warlock a smelly, stinky warlock drow, like that's just a super childish insult. It's like,
which
and
also
all
makes
their all
I
their
wonder what their age is, because
yeah, like
that's
that's kind of what I'm curious about now. How old are they really? Because there's just a lot of context clues that make it seem like they are like they seem to be behaving very childishly and adolescent like, but
it's kind of yeah. Um, the two the major two events that earned this post its title goes as follows in this order. My character was assassinated. Her past caught up with her and she was killed, bled out in the middle of the tundra. But the DM and I talked about this and it was meant to happen. The
okay,
DM
all right,
sent me
okay.
some cool prosthetic homebrew that I really wanted to use, so he made a plan for my character to get killed, lose an arm in the process, and be brought back as a reborn character with an arm made of magic from the Raven Queen.
Hey, we
What I
see, we
was
just talked about that earlier.
Yeah,
You know, the cool
what I
magic prosthetics.
what I wasn't expecting was the DM to give me a choice in letting my character die or taking the resurrection in exchange for something. The original trade would have been that she comes back to life, but no matter what she or her father did, she and him would forever have their fates severed and couldn't do anything to save each other. Well, this was a deal my character would not have taken, and I would have let her stay dead to keep the character. But the DM threw me a bone and gave me a different deal instead, to which every time she died hereafter, she would have to stay dead for longer and longer time each time, like that stop motion Pinocchio movie if you've ever seen it. While the DM and I were talking about it, I thought it would be funny to just roll out new stats to keep everyone on their toes as we ended session before I made my decision. QK absolutely losing their mind in our general chat, saying that if my character dies, then they want a new character too. The only reason this would be an issue was because we had lost a lot of the original party, K and myself being the only characters left. The DM had even stated a while before that if we lost all the PCs, he would consider ending the campaign, as no one's character would have the same initiative to act and all that. So K threatening to make a new character because I might make a new character made things even more complicated. I had to put almost a year of my time at this point. I put almost a year of my time in at this point and didn't want it to go down the drain because of this, which also plays into why the DM uh, gave me an easier deal for my character to take her life back. Kay had an actual breakdown over this. Why? I still have no clue. The second event was a dragon encounter, an adult black dragon that was destroying the 10 towns. It was the most high stakes encounter we had ever had at that point, and everyone was stressed out to say the least. Myself and the artificer cast fly on each other so we can actually reach the dragon who keeps doing fly-by breath attacks. After
Oh.
almost an hour and a half of combat, we finally slay the dragon, with myself landing the final blow. I was fucking ecstatic. My first dragon encounter, and I was the one to kill it. Kay, however, wasn't happy. They immediately start screaming about how they couldn't land a hit on the dragon, and they were useless for the fight, saying that the DM ran the encounter wrong, which upset the DM, who was once again running a written encounter from the module.
Yeah, I would assume as
They kept
much.
screaming over the voice call while we all tried to calm them down. It ended with a relatively calm barbarian player character who snapped and went off on them. There was so much yelling and fighting that I just left. I heard from the DM after the fact that Kay threatened to leave, which I guess they thought would work like it had in the past. But everyone who was left in the voice call told them to go ahead. They stayed and continued to have issues with them threatening to kill off their character if things didn't go their way, or they weren't the MVP of every session. Needless to say, the DM kicked them after a few more sessions.
I can't believe that even after all of that, even after that final apparent blow up,
Yeah,
that you still let them stay. Like they literally were threatening to leave, and you were like, and everybody who was still there were like, go. And you're like, I'll stay. And you're like, no. That is a literal. This isn't even a choice on your part anymore. No. This is a you are going now. You are leaving.
I think for me,
leave.
For me, if you have a 4-person party and a DM, so 5 people total, and someone is being an asshole and it's like, I'm gonna leave, man, you kick them, keep playing, because guess what? 3 people is even better anyway. If you have to change slightly the difficulty encounters for the module, just do it. But if you could do it with 4 people, you can do it with 3, and 3 is usually actually better, in my opinion. They definitely, because there was definitely more than one other player that wasn't mentioned, because they used a plural. What I really don't understand here is, well, honestly, part of me thinks that this person is significantly younger than the other people at the table,
or at least mentally they seem to be. Like it seems weird that they wouldn't, that OP though wouldn't like bring that up at all if they really were like, if they were legitimately younger. I can't, like, why would the OP deliberately omit that except for to make themselves look deliberately better in the situation? It just seems weird. Like, so it's like, again, either they're all the same age. We don't know exactly how old any of them are. They could be like teenagers. They could be like middle schoolers, maybe, I guess. Like, but it's like, this person, K, seems like exponentially like childish, and like, even again, their threat to try to get people to do what they want to, like, I'll leave the game, I'm gonna leave. It's like, really? how freaking how freaking childish can you get? Really? You're going to try and hold over your own annoying presence as a means of trying to get what you want. Like, oh, as if people actually like and give enough of a crap about you and your presence again here in this game for that to be an actual legitimate threat. At that point, it's a goddamn gift. It's like, hey, please make my day. Good Lord. I thought you would never volunteer. Please. And they did it, and yet everybody still let them come back. And it's like, why? It has to be because they were all friends. It has to be because they all have to be relatively young or something. And they're all friends, and this is why this happened and went on as long as it did. It has to be. I just do not understand how this continued for as long as it did, with almost no real like attempts at addressing the issues and fixing it. Like,
yeah, it's definitely it's a weird one. I don't quite understand the attitude it had. I understand, certain times where you're like, well, I want my character to be a part of this, yada yada yada, whatever. But like, it doesn't sound like they were particularly great in any aspect of the game. Not to be like mean, but it sounds like they didn't know how to play the game or whatever. They didn't feel like they were doing things correctly. I don't know. There's no upside.
But they kept. I mean, it didn't even seem like they felt like they weren't doing things right. It seemed often that they just felt like the GM was unfairly punishing them and doing things to them. They seem to think that they were doing things perfectly right, and doing everything that they could, like the correct way, because they kept going off by themselves. They would break the party up and they would run ahead and start triggering traps and other things by themselves. And it's like, and then they would get upset about consequences happening for those actions. And you're just like, what else did you really expect to happen? Or at the very least, not necessarily, it's not an automatic foregone conclusion, of course.
No.
But it's still a highly likely scenario of like, if you're gonna be scouting ahead and if it's gonna be super far ahead from the rest of your party, as a monk, that does make sense. As a monk, you have a lot of freaking movement. You're probably gonna be pretty dexterous and therefore stealthy. So it's like, sure. And you have high wisdom, hopefully, too, for perception and your awareness. So yeah, you are a great choice for a scout. But you also then have to be aware that depending on how far you go, you're going to be potentially in some hot, deep, shitty water if you don't take care. And you have to kind of just bite the bullet for that if you get caught up. Otherwise, don't go so far next time or get some items. I don't know, something. There's plenty of other things here besides just simply being a whiny little punk and trying to blame everybody and everything else for their shit and then feeling bad because they didn't get to be the star in the show. I mean, there's clear, huge main character syndrome here, 100% from everything that they have said, which is another not uncommon trait in younger people, you know, where they're like, they want to be like the characters in the books that they've read or the shows that they've watched or the movies that they've seen, you know, and they're like, it is me, I'm the main character, yeah, and it's like, D&D is a cooperative storytelling game. Every character, every player character is the main character. You all are.
It's so fucking. It's just immature. Like that's the reality.
That's what I'm saying.
Just super
it's
immature.
crazy how immature and childish that this is. Again, even from his insults to the warlock player, it's like, what the hell, dude? Like it seemed like they are playing with a literal 6-year-old, and it's just like, I do not understand why they kept going as long as they did. Any other comments and thoughts about this one, Sammy?
No.
All right. Let's go ahead then, and we'll finish today's episode off with this last one here that I thought was particularly interesting as well. Maybe not interesting, but very specific and certainly compelling in a very specific way. Titled, Player Finds Every Excuse to Halt Campaign So He Can Say I'm a Bad DM by Narcoleptic Bunny, or Binui. This happened over 1 year ago when I first started DMing. It was for a Darkest Dungeon inspired one-shot where the players had to investigate a farm taken over by the Color of Madness. I like that. That's a cool name. I'm me, the DM. Kodiak, the problem player. Luciano, the other player. And if you're reading this, Luciano, I'm sorry that you had to deal with Kodiak. Now, to be honest, the problems with Kodiak started before we had even started, and I should have kicked him then and there. It started with me just wanting to see their character sheets before I started the game. I'd already checked Luciano's, simply reading it over before handing it back to him. Why do you want to see my sheet? Kodiak said. I just want to check it. I'm not gonna do anything to it. My word, I said. I don't believe you, Kodiak said. They didn't do anything to my sheet, Luciano said. This went on for a while before he finally caved in and let me check it, or so I thought. After only a couple of seconds of me reading it, Kodiak pulled it away, and I just threw my arms up and got on with the game. The game started with me saying that there was a note in the players' mailboxes telling them that they've been specifically selected for a job that may require their expertise. I don't go, said Kodiak. Why? I questioned. It's what my character would do. Holy shit, he freaking said it. Like right then and there. Is that not? Okay, we'll keep going. Me, internally. Oh, for fuck! Kodiak, let's just get on with the game. Please. Kodiak, nope. I'll be gone at 4:30 anyways. After a bit more back and forth, I made up a BS excuse for why they needed to go to the quest giver. Me. Okay, a magical gun materializes behind your head. Kodiak. You can't do that. Me. Well, you're not going. Kodiak. You can't just kill me. I need to make a roll first. You're a bad DM. Again, more back and forth. Eventually, Kodiak caves. Again. Luciano had fun with it by their estimations and got me laughing till my sides hurt by begging the gun to shoot his player. After a while, they get to the quest giver. Both Luciano and Kodiak start asking about what monsters they're going to encounter, and I let it slip that I included a joke boss that can apply a 1d20 damage over time. Kodiak. Why does it do that much damage? Me. It's a joke boss. I made it. Kodiak. Can I go fight it? Me. Depends on if Kodiak. Let me fight it so it can kill me. Me. Why do you want to die? Kodiak. You're a bad DM. That's why. Luciano. Kodiak, you don't even want to play. They got into their first combat encounter against some twig blights, and shortly after, Kodiak left. I tried to be nice to him, but his response was, go F yourself. Learn to DM. The rest of the session was fine. Luciano mostly said how boring it was without another player, and I agreed, but we were both enjoying the roleplay. TLDR, player says they don't want to play, then proceeds to play, halts campaign at every opportunity, and then leaves. End post. Now, there are so many things about this particular post. Obviously, first and foremost, if a person, a player it is, or an aspiring player, literally says that they don't even really want to play this game, maybe don't have them play the game. Find somebody else, something. I have to believe there's got to be somebody else that you could have found that would have been far more interested or inclined to play than this guy. Because at that point, you are literally inviting conflict, issues, all kinds of shit into your game by bringing in a player who doesn't even actually want to play. And it shows like straight off. Literally, he is giving you resistance and guff about the GM checking his sheet. And it's like, he's going to say, he just wants to check it. He's not going to do anything to it, his word. And with the dude being like, I don't believe you. Like, what? Okay. Well, I mean, you can see him, though. You can literally see him. You guys are in person. You hand him the sheet. He looks at it. You can just watch him. How is this a thing that you have to like? You can be like, I don't believe you. Then watch him. And he hands the sheet back, and he didn't do anything. Like that a problem alone. Like this, maybe. I mean, this could be that this is a fake post, maybe, because there is just a lot about this that just seems kind of like literally cartoonish in so many ways. Where it's just like we also don't have like a ton of specific circumstances except for just the ones, and the GM kind of just waxes on or just kind of glosses over a lot of it, where he's like, this went on for a while before he caved and let me check it, or so I thought. And he's like, he gives it, and after only a couple seconds, he snatches it away from me. And then the GM just like, all right, well, let's just play the game, I guess. Which is like, well, the whole point, how are you going to play the game if you don't even know what's on his sheet? If you don't even know, like, if he says, like, he has, I have a sword that gives me 10d10 slashing damage on a hit. And you're just like, what? Like,
like I hate when people don't want to show their sheets or stuff like that. Like I feel like that's always a red flag no matter what.
100%.
But yeah, I don't know. I just don't understand the attitude that people have for stuff like this.
Like
it just seems so backwards.
I feel like there had to be some kind of pretext to this. Like I feel like Kodiak already seemed to have some weird kind of like vibe towards the OP before this even started. Because I'm literally saying like he doesn't believe that the GM won't mess with the sheet. Why? Have you played with him before? Like have you played TTRPGs before? It doesn't seem like it. It seems like you're relatively new, kind of.
Like
Like
it is possible that this person also had a bad experience, but like they're really not doing a great job
of remedying it, no. Because
no.
even the thing like again, the next big bombshell is dude literally gives them the adventure hook, and dude's just straight up like, I don't go.
Yeah, which is like super
Why are
weird.
you here? Why are you here then? Like, okay, you said you didn't want to play. Why are you playing then? What changed? What did they convince you or something? Did your friends go like, please? Did they beg you and you just wanted to feel good by maybe doing them a favor or something? Or like what?
But like again, we've talked about this like 100 times. Make characters and yourself actually want to participate. Otherwise, what's the point? Because
I
there
mean,
really isn't one.
there's none. But again, that's the point being. It's like, okay, if you didn't want to play, don't play. If you changed your mind because your friends were begging you and asking you to, then at that point, then you got to at least do your best to participate because you're not actually playing. If you said you were, then just do it. Like this is not freaking help. Like, again, it seems more so like he was maybe just trying to deliberately incite or spite the GM.
Yeah,
Like
100%.
he's just trying to he's just antagonizing and being hostile towards the GM. I feel like there's got to be something. And to be fair, the GM also is like the whole okay, an invisible gun materializes behind your head in order to like force him to go. It's like, look, I am not necessarily against handling like these kinds of issues in game per se.
Yeah,
Like, but it really highly depends on how you go about it. Like
yeah, and
at this point, if you're gonna make a magical handgun that's going to shoot them in the back of the head or whatever, like you might as
it
well just talk outside of game because there are no mechanics where that is actually a thing
no,
or a
and
true reaction or consequence. Just have an outside of game conversation at that point. Like,
yeah, I don't know how we've ended up like with multiple of these like super immature.
I mean, it was a theme. It wasn't even intentional at first. Like, it was just a theme that we've had today where these guys like immature, like control freaks, where you're just like, bro. And it's, dude literally says the infamous words for real, apparently. Again, it could be a fake post, maybe. But dude literally says, it's what my character would do. Your character
Mhm.
wouldn't go, then why did you make that character?
It's a good question.
Oh
It is a really good question.
God.
But we've talked about that because what my character would do is such a like double-edged sword of like because for some people what my character would do is like genuinely role playing,
Yeah, it can be
and for other people what my character would do is just being a it's an
a
excuse to just be a
douche.
shithead.
You're
Yeah.
just being a douche. You're just like it's like what? You're just deliberately screwing the game up for almost everybody else. Or you're trying to be again like an edge cringe lord solo lone wolf shit, which that's not how the game works. You can again scout ahead. You're right. We talked about that even with the last one. You can be a scout if you're a rogue, if you're a monk, if you're a ranger,
Yeah.
even a druid. You guys can scout ahead. You can detach from the party a bit, but usually with the intention of returning. You're only going most of the time for intelligence, for
Yeah.
information gathering, and then you come back to the party and you attack or approach the obstacle together on a united front. And that only works if everyone wants to actually go on the adventure to play the game.
Yeah, everyone has to kind of be a part of it.
Otherwise, again, like what? Why are you here? Why are we even playing a
Why are
game?
we here?
Why
Just to
are
suffer.
just to suffer? It's true. It's true. Like that is literally the best summarization for this whole scenario, for this type of scenario is they just want to be difficult. They just want to screw the game up. And at that point, just kick them. There is no redemption in my eyes for that. If you're just going to deliberately be a freaking shitter and try to crap on everyone else's party and parade for no reason other than you're bored or maybe feeling left out or just feeling like a freaking troll, get the F out, bro. Leave. Boot them. Kick them. It's done.
Yeah, they really should. Like it's not. I think we forget like it's really not that hard to kick people. Like I don't
It shouldn't be, you
understand.
know?
I don't understand why some people are so adverse to just removing someone from a group. Because like it's not that bad.
Again, there might sometimes be extenuating circumstances, maybe, but there are also plenty of times where it's not either, where this person is just not great or conducive to your game, either because they're a shitter, maybe they just don't really have fun in that way. This isn't the type of D&D game that they want to play. That's fine. It doesn't have to be a problem, but I guess it also maybe harkens back to the first post on people take or the first couple posts, the people take criticism or whatever poorly, even if it is delivered, fairly, reasonably, with tact and consideration.
Yeah,
People, it doesn't matter because at the end of the day, it is still about how the individual chooses to receive that information.
very
And
true. And like,
you can't control that, unfortunately.
well, yeah, what are you supposed to do at that point? It's just unfortunate because like again, I feel like, whereas a lot of our other ones we do of this, it's very like these people are just insane.
Yeah, it's very
Or like
clearly who the problems
like
are.
doing super fucked up shit. Like these are just people who are immature. And that's kind of all it is just hi, we're just gonna be immature today. And I just I wish I was I don't know. It just makes me sad because like it's not that hard to just be mature about stuff like
It really
this.
shouldn't be. It
It's a
really it.
game that you have to agree to play. Like no one's forcing you to do it. So like, what's the point of just fucking around and being weird and
I mean, all the comments are like kind of just lambasting the problem player. Where it's like, yeah, correct answers. Why do you want to see my sheet? Because I'm the DM, and if I don't see your sheet, you don't get to play. Well, he didn't really want to play anyway, so maybe he was banking on that. Another one. It's what my character would do. Well, then make one that wouldn't. Thank you. Perfect. Words to live by.
that's a good one.
Yeah. Let me fight it so it can kill me. Hey, let me save you the trouble. You're out of the game. Bye. There you go. It's like if you don't want to be part of it, why why are you trying to get the GM apparently to do something to you? Just leave. If you don't want to be here, then just leave.
Yeah, just leave. It's
Like you again, if you don't want to be, I don't know. And again, maybe we're missing context. Maybe this is fake. But the irony of it is, though, is this scenario, though, it still isn't even that uncommon, though. There are so many stories of things very similar to this, where people
yeah.
act this way. And you're just sitting there. The only thing that makes it is they're just drama kings and queens. They're just attention sponges. They're energy van. They just want any attention, even if it's negative. They just want to be an absolute freaking issue and problem to get people's attention. And it's like, God damn.
Yeah, it's just dumb.
Well, that being the case, y'all, I do believe that that's where we're wrapping up today. Thank you all so much for tuning in. Please, once again, leave comments down below in the video. What do you guys make of these stories? What are your thoughts on these people? What are some of your theories on why these people act or behave the way they do and such? If you've had your own experiences and stuff like this, or maybe you have some your own insights, we would love and appreciate to hear it. But other than that, again, like and comment on the video if you haven't. Subscribe and share the channel, of course. And we are always so thankful and happy if you stay with us this time and for all of your support. Thank you once again, as always. And well, we hope you have a great rest of your day. And we hope to see you next time when we dive back down into the archive. Bye, you guys.
Thank you.